comfort of people who may be in their old age and looking to this money for their retirement income. Half of those 8,000 private depositors would be entirely covered by the FSCS if and when it pays out. Half, maybe some 4,000 people, including my two constituents, would lose tens and in some cases hundreds of thousands of pounds. I will give way.
I'm very pleased that this has been raised today because huge numbers of people are affected by the collapse of Cowthing, Singer and Freelander Bank, Isle of Man. But will she accept that this is largely due to UK government action? And it is because of the government action here in London that the bank, which didn't need to collapse, was actually folded. And therefore, will she agree with me that the government here in Britain should have liaised with the Manx government and with the Icelandic government before taking action which has led to this disaster?
I'll leave the Minister to reply as to the actions of UK Treasury. What I would say is that it was clear that the banks were in trouble and had been in trouble for some time. And that, well, I'll leave the Minister to reply to that. I don't think we can blame our own government for taking action to protect UK. Well, he might wish to. I'm not prepared to do that. But I think to protect UK investors and I'm not clear what happened with the transfer of this £500 million, whether it was transferred from Iceland to London, whether it was transferred from the Isle of Man to London, and what would happen. I do understand, though, that people are extremely agitated. I'm going to make way, if I may, because I just want to talk a little bit about bonds. The compensation scheme does not cover people who invested in bonds, like my constituent Mr Speed. I've got a letter from Royal Scandia with whom Mr Speed invested his money. It informs him that deposits are held by and in the name of Royal Scandia and therefore are deemed as a corporate investment. As such, the Isle of Man Depositors Compensation Scheme does not cover these deposits. The letter continues, there is a parental guarantee by Cowthing Bank HF, registered in Iceland, that covers these assets. This was put in place in September 2007. It is currently unclear if this guarantee will be honoured. The Isle of Man government has made representation to the UK government, which is responsible for defending the Isle of Man's interests internationally, requesting them to press the government of Iceland to honour Cowthing's guarantee. It's important to remember in all this that we are dealing with Icelandic banks. That 100% guarantee is something that people have mentioned to me over and over again. They're putting their money into an institution that had a parental guarantee. It now looks unlikely that guarantee will be honoured by Iceland, as the bank's liabilities were many times the sum of Iceland's GDP. And there's another very important group of people who have also lost everything. People who are investing for their retirement through the self-invested personal pension, or the SIP pension, have also lost out. They are UK resident and UK taxpayers, but no onshore bank will accept SIP deposits because they are held in trust. They have to be placed offshore. The Manx authorities will not accept that these are retail deposits, and therefore they too are not covered by their compensation scheme. I give way to the Honourable Gentleman for Fareham, if he's still interested. If he still wishes to...
Order. Let me just explain that in an adjournment debate there cannot be a front bench intervention. It is just a rule we observe on these occasions. Ms Mary Craig.
For that clarification, I give way to my member from Oxford East.
All honourable members, how grateful we are to her in her generosity in giving way, and we appreciate that. And lots of honourable members, including my honourable friend Sother Gabernzi, have constituents affected by this. She was right to draw attention to the issue of the Icelandic guarantee, and I hope she'll accept that at least we're keen to hear from the Minister what the government is going to say about the fact that funding held in the UK bank for KSF Isle of Man was sequestered by the British government, and that may be money that could arguably be said to be usable to refund at least some of the deposits held by unfortunate people caught in this problem.
I think that point has been made. I mean, I think we heard from the Chancellor at Monday's Treasury Select Committee meeting. The Isle of Man is a tax haven sitting in the Irish Sea. The Isle of Man's tax status may be useful for some non-British residents, and it may also be useful for some super-British residents. But the reality is actually that depositors pay a 20% withholding tax at source in the Isle of Man. So any person who is a basic rate taxpayer in the UK no longer has any tax advantage by putting their money into an Isle of Man account. And again, I think that's something that is not properly explained to people when they are taking out these investments. And depositors declare their income from deposits to the government of the country in which they reside via a year-end tax return. So obviously people paying tax at the higher rate will be able to pay that extra 20% at the end of the year. My constituents are British people living in Britain who have lost the money that they've worked for their entire lives. They're now relying on Britain to support them and to defend their interests. As the Honourable Member for South Derbyshire said, many were originally savers with the Derbyshire Building Society. I know the Honourable Lady for Amber Valley has affected constituents as well, the Portman and the Cheshire Building Society. A few people, like my constituent Miss Watt, were working in the Isle of Man. Some are working for British companies, some are working for the UK government abroad, some are working for UK charities abroad and are not allowed to have accounts in UK banks because they're not resident. I don't pretend to be an expert in matters of international finance and banking, but I have had to learn quite a lot about this over the last few weeks, and the issue of the transfer of money has been raised. I want to briefly turn to the situation of Landsbank Guernsey. Those people receive 30% of their savings from the liquidator, and I don't think people who invested in Guernsey were aware that it's not part of the European Economic Area, so there isn't even the basic £15,000 compensation scheme that applies in Iceland. I think serious questions need to be asked of the accountants and the independent financial advisors who advised people to invest offshore, and they clearly haven't explained the risks involved. I'd like to end with some questions to my honourable friend. I would like to ask if his Treasury officials will meet with representatives of the KSF Isle of Man